Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Tzadik Aleph 91 in Bava Basra. Today we finished the fifth parak. So to speak, in Dapim we're more than halfway through. In Prakim we'll finish the halfway point. Bezrat Hashem today. So we're on to about the sixth line down on Tzadik Aleph. We saw yesterday Shmuel said you're not supposed to earn a profit of more than a sixth on staples. Tana Rabbanan says the Brisa ain't mistakon. Again, we learned for a four shlema and for a Hatzalah for all of Bnei Yisrael, Chenu Kol Beis Yisrael, and Asum B'Ser V'Shivya. May our Torah be a schus for everyone. Tana Rabbanan ain't mistakon b'hamayim b'beisim. When it comes to eggs, Rashbam explains, are not as much of a staple as the other things that we talked yesterday about wine and oil and flour. Those are more staples, but eggs were also common to be eaten. And it says when it comes to eggs, you shouldn't earn more than double. Now it says twice. It doesn't say double. It says you shouldn't make a profit twice when it comes to eggs. Now, what does that mean to profit twice? One shot is Amar Mari Bamar. He says, Pligi bar Rav Shmuel, Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. Machlokes Rav and Shmuel, what to? Yeah, it's so short. Huh? What? No, it's okay. All right, it's okay. It's okay. We have the other 3 feet. You have the other. I said, same as stocking pamaim beitzim. You shouldn't earn. Again, you shouldn't make a profit twice and comes to eggs. What does it mean? So Marvar says the supshat. Pligabar Rav Shmuel. Chadamar al chadtrei. One says you shouldn't earn double. In other words, if it costs you $1, you shouldn't sell it for $2. Chadamar tagar litagra. Again, that you shouldn't have a middleman. You shouldn't sell from one person, from the farmer to one wholesaler, and then he sells to the tzarchan, to the final customers, but rather let the farmer sell directly to the customers. So to the final customers, there shouldn't be two profits involved. So that's two ways to look at pamayim. Either that you shouldn't earn double. Now, shouldn't earn double, but you're allowed to earn more than a sixth. As Rashbam says, it's not like a staple that we said yesterday. That Shmuel said that you shouldn't. One of the things he said was a mistake when it comes to staples. Or we also said unless there's plenty of, unless if there's plenty of food, let's say if there was plenty of oil, then you could make a decent profit there because people could always go. There's a market there. You shouldn't raise the prices when it's difficult for the poor people. But if there's plenty there and the prices are stable and they can buy elsewhere, then it's okay. When it comes to eggs, you can earn more than a sixth. You could earn up to double. Or the pshat is that you shouldn't have two middlemen involved. Tan Rabbanan, the first of the wide lines of the Gemara. Matzriyan al prakmatya, when merchandise becomes so cheap. Now here's the point: it becomes so cheap that there's no economy. Everything is going for nothing. There's nobody. You have an economy. You have buyers and sellers and middlemen and retailers and farmers. When things are so cheap, then you have to pray. Masriya means like you make truas, you blow the shofar, or at least means Rashbam says betfila, ba'afila b'Shabbos. Even you pray even on Shabbos when it comes to these problems. Normally you don't pray for things like parnasa on Shabbos, but he says when it comes to this, even for parnasa like this, when things are so bad that the merchandise is worth nothing, shehuzla Rashbam says ba'afila b'Shabbos, if it's become so cheap that there's no economy. Amar b'Yochanan, you go on klei pishn b'Bavel. If you're talking about flax or linen garments in Bubble, which was a staple there, it became so cheap then that people couldn't, there was no economy. Or Yain Shem Eretz Yisrael. In Eretz Yisrael, the produce was not linen, but rather wine and oil. So if that became so cheap, then you must spot even on Shabbos. Rabbi Yosef, food is all become a subashis. Then if it's almost half its price, meaning if it normally what would cost 10 is down to 6. So it's almost down to halfway of its prices, therefore there's no economy. Because people can't make a profit, everything is so cheap. So therefore, you have to pray for that. You don't leave Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. Elam kein amdus v'sayim b'sela. Unless the prices of food are so expensive that 2 saw. Normally, you can buy 4 saw for a sela. Think of a sela as $1. So so if you could buy, let's say, 4 saw is really a volume measure. Let's call it a gallon or whatever, a bushel, whatever you want to, whatever it was. Let's say it's a gallon. So unless it's 4, unless it's down to 2, normally it's 4 for $1. if it's down to 2 for $1, things are so expensive that $1 you're only going to get 2 instead of 4. Then you're allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. Otherwise, you don't leave Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because Rashbam says mafkias mitzvahs, because you're performing less mitzvahs in Chutz La'aretz, and not allowed to do that. That's if you can't find anything to buy at all. If you can find to buy, it just costs a lot of money. I feel I'm the saw the seller. Even you're only going to get one saw for a seller, you shouldn't leave. In other words, if things are expensive, but you can buy it, it's just expensive, you're not allowed to leave Eretz Yisrael. Shimon Bechoi told this story. This is what he said, and this is again the punishment for leaving Eretz Yisrael. Elimelech, the story of Rus. Elimelech and his 2 sons, Machlon Yom, Gedolei Ador. They were not only the greatest rabbis of the generation, Parnasei Ador, they were also the leaders of the community. They why were they killed? Remember, Machlon and Yom both died. They all died. Elimelech, they all died. Shiyatsu me'aretz l'chutzos, because they left Eretz Yisrael for chutzos. Of course, Elimelech was married to Nomi, and Machlon and Chilin were married to Orpah and to Rus. And the famous story of Rus and Moabia. So why were they punished? Because they left Eretz Yisrael to Chutz La'aretz. Shenemar says, "B'tayom kol ha'ir." Everybody was like amazed, like everybody was talking a land. Atamana has also, is this Nami? Maya has also, what does it mean? Is this Nami? All right, it's like Amru. They said, "Chazisim Nami shiyatzu v'aretz l'chutzot." Do you see Nomi, who had left Eretz Yisrael, went to Chutzos Ma'al? So what happened? She lost her family. Or maybe it's like also Hayom Shabasa Rus and Moabia Eretz Yisrael. When Rus came to Eretz Yisrael, right? The day she came, Mesa Ishel Boaz. Boaz is, again, eventually Rus was going to marry Boaz, as we know, right? But at the day that she came to Eretz Yisrael, that was the day that Boaz's wife died. Behind Damrinshi, we'll see in a minute that sounds like he only had one wife, but it's a little bit hard to understand based on the number of children he had. Behind Damrinshi, as some people say, Adalo Shachav Shikba. Before a person dies, Kaima Manu Beisa, the master of his house, is already raiding. In other words, Rebbe Shalom, so to speak, prepares while one person died. Rebbe Shalom already prepared his replacement or her replacement. So here, when Boaz's wife died, Ruth had already arrived in Eretz Yisrael to eventually assume her position. Rashbam says over here, Hashem brings the report for the Makkah. You have belief in Hashem that even if there's a loss, somebody it will be made up some other way. So here, Jerusalem brought Boaz's new wife to Eretz Yisrael already before his first wife died. Amar Barapuna, Amarav. Iftzan Zamoaz. Iftzan is one of the Shoftim, one of the judges mentioned Shoftim in Sefer Shoftim. And he says, Rav said that Iftzan, the judge, is actually Boaz. Was Boaz? My Kamash, what's the Kiddush in that? This goes along with another thing that Rabba Bar Rav Huna said. First one was Rabba Bar Rav Huna, name of Rav. This is another thing that Rabba Bar Huna said. Amar Bar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. May have asked Mishtos Asa Boaz Labanah. Boaz made 120 meals, meaning celebrations, wedding celebrations for his children. Shnemar, Ahilo. This is speaking about Iftzan, the Shofet Iftzan, but Rabbi Rafuna says that Iftzan is actually Boaz, just mentioned by a different name. It says Vahilo Shloshim Banim. He had 30 sons, but Shloshim Banim and 30 daughters. It's one wife. It's pretty hard to figure unless there were multiple births. He had 30 sons and 30 daughters. So Vahilo Shloshim Banim, Shloshim Banos Shalach Achutza. The 30 daughters that he had, he sent them out to get married to other men. Shloshim Banos Hevi Labanah. So he had 30 sons, and his 30 sons. He brought, he was Mashadach. He sent out his 30 daughters to get married by other people, and he brought 30 women, 30 girls to marry for his sons. Menachutz from outside, maybe outside of his locality. And it says that, again, talking about Iftzan, who were relating to Boaz, he judged Bnei Israel for 7 years. For each and one of his children, notice he has 60 children. He made 60 weddings. He made 2 meals. In other words, he made 2 meals. So to speak, Ram says he made an erusin, an engagement feast, and by the Nesuin, the Sheva Brachas is considered one meal. So he had 2 feasts for each, one the erusin and one the Nesuin. right? And Rashbam says, okay, the Arison presumably, right? Basically, Sudas Arison she mitzvah, Vasudas Asuin Kol Shavas Yom. So one was in the house, was in his house, and one was in the house of the Mechutin. That's what he says. Okay, so he had these 60 children. He married them all off, made feasts for all of them, right? One feast when the Arison, one feast in the Suin. He never invited Manoach, the father, or the eventual father of Shmuel. Manoach was childless, and he never invited him to any of the meals. Omri said, and this is a strange thing to understand from a great man like Ifson or Boaz. Maybe he didn't want to make him feel bad. He says, Omar could not kara. Unfortunately, this barren mule, but my probably, how is he going to invite me back? In other words, he didn't invite him to any of his kids' weddings because he said he's not going to be able to invite me back, so he never invited him. So you might say, well, he took offense to that, never invited him, but maybe his intention was he would feel that, if he can't repay it, if somebody invites you and they don't have the ability, you invite somebody and they don't have the ability to invite you back, they may refuse the invitation because who? Yeah. Okay, so right, he had two wives, but right, but at that point maybe he didn't have any. So he says, how is he going to pay me back? Eventually, he had Shmuel also. He had Shmuel. Yeah. So at that point, he was barren. All these 60 children died during the lifetime of Ifsan, of Boaz. All during his life. People say, during your lifetime, you had 60 kids. Like they were giving an example from Ifsan. You had 60 kids. Shisan Lamalach. What's the point of having 60 if they're all going to die in your lifetime anyway? Nobody's going to survive you. Better to go back, but go back and give birth to one who will be brighter, be stronger than all the other ones, meaning that will last, he will survive. And Rashbam says, Rashbam points out this is six lines from into the wide lines in Rashbam. Or Abed in English, right? Or as the Arabs call it, Abed. Obed Shaholid Boaz. In other words, the Ifsan, who was Boaz, he had 60 children while he was called Ifsan, and they all died in his lifetime. But it shows to show you that you shouldn't give up. He eventually married Rus, and he had a son, Oved, right? Boaz married Rus. Eventually David Melch Yisrael came out of that. So in other words, even though he had no mazel from 60 children who he married all off because they all died, and I guess they left no children, but look at the better. Don't give up. Even in his older age, he married Rus, and he impregnated her, and they gave birth to Oved, who eventually was the ancestor of Oved, who gave birth to Yishai, and Yishai gave birth to David. It was that was the Judaic the Judaic monarchy that all emanated from that last marriage. Amrav Chanan bar Rava Amrav. Elimelech v'Salmon. There were 4 people we're going to mention over here in this memra. Elimelech, that's the one, right? Elimelech, the one who was first married to Naomi and he died. The Salmon was who? The father of Boaz. So you see right away that Elimelech, right, when Boaz took over and married Rus, it was like marrying, so to speak, his first cousin's wife, right? Now, if Elimelech and Salmon, and we say Ploni Almoni, of course, was mentioned in Rus as the heir who didn't want to be Miabam Rus, but Avi Nomi and Nomi's father, all Kulam ben Nachshon ben and they all came from the tribe of Yehuda. They were all sons of Nachshon ben Aminadab. So you see the relationship over here. That number one, Nomi's marriage was to Elimelech, right? So Elimelech was her uncle. So she married her uncle, right? Because her father was Elimelech's brother. Pardon?
They're all children of Nachshon ben Aminadab.
Right. They're all children of Nachshon ben Aminadab. Elimelech and Nomi's father were the sons of Nachshon, so they were 2 brothers. So Elimelech married his niece.
They weren't the sons. They were the descendants.
Yeah.
Nachshon is Yitzias Mitzrayim.
Okay. How do you see that? it's incorrect. Rashbam says he gave birth to him. So he's his father. It's not descendants. They were descendants because you're descendant of your father also, right? So they were all descended. They were all sons of Nachshon. I'm just saying that Elimelech married his niece, which of course is permitted. It's even encouraged, right? So Elimelech married his niece Nomi, okay, and then later on now Nomi's sons, one of her daughter-in-law, her daughter-in-law was Rus, and therefore her husband was a first cousin of I guess was a first cousin of Elimelech's kid, right? We say here Salmon. No, in other words, Boaz was the father. Boaz was a first cousin of Boaz. Boaz was the son of Salmon, right? So first Elimelech was the uncle, right? Was the uncle of Nomi, and then Boaz, who was the son of Salmon, marries Nomi's daughter-in-law, which meaning basically he married his first cousin's wife. When Boaz married Ruth, eventually he married his first cousin's wife. That's what we see over here. Okay, Mike, what's the chiddush in all this? What's the point of this? Elimelech, Salmon, Tony Almoni, and Nomi's father is not mentioned by name, but they were all children of Nachshon ben Aminadab, who was a prince of Yehuda. Mike Mashwan Shafilu, even somebody who has the merit of good parents, tzaddikim, even if you come from good stock and you have schus avos, it's not going to help you if you forsake Eretz Yisrael and go to chutz la'aretz, and that's what happened to Elimelech and his sons, right? It's not going to help them in that case. Who was Avram Avinu's mother? We know Yitzchak's mother was Sarah, right? We know Yaakov's mother, right? We know all these things, right? But we don't know, where does it say? It doesn't say in the Torah who Avram Avinu's mother was. So here he tells you, Rashbam says, because the mother of Yitzchak and Yaakov were called out, we have to know who Avram's mother was. It's important to know. We'll see all this in order to be able to answer people, Apikorsim or Amaratzim, who say, how come we don't know what it is? Is this story really true? So things that aren't mentioned in the Torah, the Nevi'im told us. So Avram Avinu's mother was Amaslai ben Bas Carnivo. Now Carnivo, we'll see, is a notion of Karim Mitzom, of like a sheep, like a lamb. Okay, but her name was Amaslai. Ime de Haman Arush's mother's name was also Amaslai. She had the same first name, Bas Orvasi, but she was the daughter of Orvasi. Like Orvasi is like a relation of Orev, a raven. To tell you, the simon is Tame Tar Tar. The Haman, the Tame, his mother came from like a raven, a Tame bird. And Avram Avinu's mother, Amaslai, came from a kosher animal, like a lamb. Ime de David, who was David's mother, Nitzvis Bas Adael, Shema. Ime de Shimshon, Salphus. Once we mentioned these, we mentioned other names also of mothers who are not mentioned directly in Tanakh. Shimshon's mother was Salphapunis, and once you mentioned his mother's name, Bachse, you mentioned his mother's name, mentioned also his sister Bachse, Nashayan. That was her name. The Girsa is or Nashik. Why do we have to know all these things? To answer the meaning. When they ask you what's going on over here, Rashbam says 4 lines from the bottom page. Yoser be'elu minashmacher says Kedeperishis Taima. Like, what's going on? How come these mothers aren't mentioned? If these people were really real and true, how come they're not mentioned? And the answer is whatever was not written directly in Tanakh, the Nevi'im told us their names. This is, I think, the only place that you'll find in Shas or anywhere where we know it. It's a standard question. Who was Avram's mother? Avram Avinu, right? He was the first Jew, right? What is his mother's name? Here the Gemara tells you his mother's name. Back in the Gemara, 5 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. That Nimrod was who had imprisoned Avram Avinu and tortured him. He was imprisoned. Avram Avinu was imprisoned for 10 years. Shalosh Bekusa, 3 years in Kuta, that place. Vesheva Bekardo, 7 years in Cardo, or Cardo, some spelled differently. Ravdimi Benardo, Masli Pilim is the other way around, 7 and 3, not 3 and 7. Amr of Chista, Ibra Zeira, the small little place called Ibra, right? Kashmo. That little place Zehu Ur Kasim. That's the famous Ur Kasim that Avram was, where Avram had a miracle performed to him, right? That he survived. And what's the nafkamina? Or Rashbam tells you the nafkamina is that if you come to a place, maybe we don't know where Ur Kasim, we can't find Ur Kasim on the map today. But at the time of the Gemara, he said there was a place called Ibra Zeira, the side of the side of Ibra. And if you come to that place, you have to make a bracha. Baruch she'asanisim avasena b'makom hazeh. If you come to a place where a miracle was performed, the Jews, you're supposed to say a bracha. So he says, if you come to that place, you can make that bracha. Yom Rav Chanan bar Rava, 2 lines from the bottom of the page in the Gemara. Amar Rav. Osa Yom Sheniftar Avram Avinu, the day that Avram Avinu died, the day that he died. Amdu Kol Gedolei Yumas Olam B'Shura. All the elders, the leaders of the Goyim stood up in a row. And they said, Oilo la'olam sha'avad manhigo. Woe unto the world that's lost its leader. Oilo l'sfina. Woe unto the boat, unto the ship sha'avad kavanit that's lost its pilot, its captain. Pasuk v'amisnase l'chol rosh. We say that in davening. We say misnase l'chol rosh, that you're held above all. You are the leader, the top, the head, above all others. So he darshans that not just as we're talking about the Rebbeinu Shalom, misnase l'chol rosh, that Hashem is exalted above all other leaders, but also Rav Chanan bar Rava, the drash is Rav Afilu. This is brought down because of the author of the Memra, right? This is also we have Rav Chanan bar Rava Rav. We had before Rava bar Apuna Rav, and here we have things that Rav Chanan bar Rav is one who told us what Avram Avinu's mother was, and he told us before about Elimelech and Salmon. And that name is mentioned, Rav Chanan bar Rav Amrav. So here's another thing that he mentioned. Not only does it mean that Hashem is exalted above all others, but also Hashem exalts everybody. Rav Chanan bar Rav Amrav afilu reish gagusa, even the person in charge of the wells to decide, okay, Yankel, today it's your turn to draw water from the well. Shmerel, tomorrow it's your turn. Even that person, it's not such a high position, the supervisor, the well supervisor, right? Afilu reish gagusa mishmaya mukmileh. He's appointed from heaven. In other words, he got his job also from heaven. It didn't just happen by happenstance. He disagrees with what we said before. We said before that Machlon and Chilon were killed because they died. Hashem had them die because they left Eretz Yisrael because there wasn't any food. Right? We talked about it. You're not allowed to leave unless things were, there was nothing to buy. So you shouldn't leave unless there's nothing to buy, right? So he says, you can't buy anything, or that we'll see there's no money on him, so shouldn't leave unless there's nothing to buy. But it's fine if there's what to buy, even if it's expensive, you should buy. And he said, why did they leave? Because they left Eretz Yisrael out of there was no food, apparently. So he says, Rav Meir Shapiro, Rabbi Shiur argues, he argues with this is chas v'shalom. Shafilu matzah subin lo yatsu. They wouldn't have left even if they only found like coarse bran. They wouldn't have left. Why were they punished though? They died young. Since they were the leaders of the generation, not only the Talmudic leaders, the rabbinic leaders, but they were also the temporal leaders. They were the leaders of the community, the governors, because they should have been Mavakish Racham. There was a famine. They should have begged for mercy for the generation. When you cry out, Yatzilucha, the ones who you save, that will also, you're crying out will save you just like you're trying to save them. And you didn't make enough of an effort to pray for the people in your community. That's why they were killed. Amar Rabbi Barchana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lo Shana Lemos Bezol. This that we say that you shouldn't leave, you shouldn't leave as long as there's food to be found. Elamos Bezol, Paris Bioker. Things are expensive, but you don't have a lot of money. Elamos Bioker. But if money is expensive, meaning you don't have any money, it's not that you have no money to pay for anything. You can't buy anything. But Paris Bioker, even Elamos Bioker, if things are just so you don't have the money, I feel on the Arbus on the seller, even if there's a good price, it's only you can buy a whole 4 saw for $1, which is a standard price, but you don't have any money to buy with, and you can leave because you have no money. If you have no money, you can't live. You can't survive. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan said, I remember there was a time when you could buy 4 saw for a seller, a good average price. Still, people were starving. There were many people, kappa in Tver, there were people who had a bloated stomach. A bloated stomach is a sign of famine, right? Starvation. He says, so I remember when there was food out in the market, it wasn't expensive, but nobody had any money. They were starving. Middle less Isser, because they didn't even have an Isser. They didn't even have a small coin to buy any food with. Here and I remember Kadlo Avi Maskara and Paulie, you couldn't hire workers, Lemednach Karta, to the east of the city, Meireach Pita Maisen. Why? Because they died from the smell. Meaning, in the east of the city, the Rashbam says that the westerly wind, the wind that came from the west, where things were more, they were better off. People in the west were better off, and they were able to bake bread and eat, etc. The people in the east side of the city, were poor, and you couldn't hire any workers there because they were so poor that they would die from the good smell of the bread. In other words, they were so hungry, and the good smell of the bread that the wind blew in, they would die from that, so to speak, from that torture. So there are times when there was nothing, that you had no money, then that was a reason to leave Eretz Yisrael. But people left, and that's the talk of the reason. Back in the 100 years ago, when things were very difficult here, there was no economy. People left for Parnasa. They couldn't survive here. Said another thing he remembered. Now here, and I remember Karabi Batsi Yanuk. I remember where things were so good that when a child would break open when he would break open a carob from a carob tree, so much that it was so productive that he opened up a carob. Today you open up a carob, it's like bucks or the dry stuff. I don't know how people eat that. They would give that out. Remember on Tu B'Shvat in Chutz La'aretz, that they would open up these carobs, and it was so oily that the oil would run down the kid's arms, both his arms. There was so much oil there when things were good. As remember, Blazer says, now here and I remember when a raven would take a piece of meat, when he would just grab a piece of meat, bite into it, the oil would run out. Shiur about hour would run out. A raven sitting on a wall. Oh, okay, all right. We heard a noise. We didn't hear an azakah, right? So yeah, he's rolling the gas tanks down. Yeah, all right. So he says, I remember when a raven would take a bite out of a piece of meat on a wall, and the oil oil from the meat was so fat that it would run all the way down the wall to the ground. And here I remember kind of in Thailand, because I remember when young boys and girls, 16 Beshuka, they would the boys and girls would walk in the marketplace, 16, 17-year-olds, young boys and girls, but they didn't sin. They knew how to keep their distance. They were not promiscuous. They were very careful to be shomer nagia, as we say. But here and I remember when people used to say in the Beis Medrash, the modi lahon nafin. If you're moda, if you agree with anything, as it comes to of the avodah zarah, goyim, if you just say yes, I agree with you, you'll fall into their hands. Don't agree with them. Rashbam says el kodem and yisur. Argue with them on everything. Don't agree with anything. You'll come to be too close to them. The misrachatz alein, if you trust them and believe in them, you lay on that everything you have will wind up in their hands. If you trust them, they'll steal everything from you. So if you just agree with them, you'll fall into their hands. If you trust them, you'll lose everything that you have. Be very careful when it comes to dealing with the avodah zarah. As he said that in story, right, that a frum Jew was standing at the train station in Switzerland, and a guy came over to him and asked him, "Do you have the time?" And he didn't want to answer him. He had a watch on. He says, well, "Why wouldn't you tell me the time?" He says, "Well, you ask me the time, then you'll ask me where I'm from, and then we're going to talk, and we'll sit on the train. Before you know it, your daughter will marry my son." So he wanted to be very careful about that. He says, "You got to be careful with the goyim." See if it says machlon v'chilyom. And the pasuk in Rusa calls them machlon chilyon. Yet in Divrei Yomim it's called Yoash v'Saraf. Those two, the same two people, are called Yosaraf. So what was their real names? We have this many places, that they had different names. What was the real name? Rav Shmuel Charamar machlon chilyon. The real name was machlon chilyon. But Lamana Krishma, why were they called Yoash and Saraf? Yoash and Asyashim and Agula. They gave up. They didn't pray to God to save them from being redeemed from the famine. because let's keep Park Hashem Asamo, the Park Hashem, you remember them? Lesam Lechem, they thought Hashem's never going to save them. They gave up. They gave up hope. So that means that's why he's called Yoash. He was Miyash. He gave up. He abandoned hope for being redeemed by God from the famine. They deserve burning to Hashem. Why is that? Because they left Eretz Yisrael. The one says Yosh B'Sarav Shman, that the real names were Yosh and Sarfa. Lamra Shukra Shman Machlon, called Machlon. Machlon She'asu Guf Mechon. They made their bodies profane. How did they make their bodies profane? Rashbam says, Chutz La'aretz Eretz Tmehi. By going to Chutz La'aretz, they profaned their bodies. Interesting, right? That just going to Chutz La'aretz, leaving Eretz Yisrael for Chutz La'aretz, which unfortunately a lot of people are doing now, especially doctors and stuff like that. You hear about a lot of that. Somebody just told me they were at the hospital getting treated, and they said that the doctor, so a woman doctor, told them that she's leaving. That's it. She's had enough. She'll get a job.
Doctors who were coming in.
Yeah, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
That's what my son is working on.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
He just coming back today.
Yeah, there's a right. Yeah. So if you're talking about that, I'll tell you that a doctor who made Aliyah told me that the way to encourage them to come is to take care of their medical school debts. That he says he has many friends in Chutz La'aretz who would like to make Aliyah, young married doctors, but they have a debt of $500,000 or more dollars. And if they come here, there's no way that their salary will ever be able to pay it back. So if you can get donors to cover, just in other words, they would sign that I'm going to make Aliyah, I'm not going to leave Israel for 20 years, sign on that. And under that agreement, their medical, their tuition, the medical loans will be paid off. Somebody will pay off for them. And that's a big plus because you can have wealthy people who can use that money to make the couples want to make Aliyah. But they simply said, I want to come, but I can't come because I'll never be able to pay back the debt. A young doctor told me this. He has friends from Einstein, they want to come, but they can't afford it. So one says, why do they call Machlon? Machlon, they made their bodies profane by leaving Eretz Yisrael. They deserve destruction by God, because they left Eretz Yisrael. And that's why they were destroyed. They left them for not for a good reason. Tanya Commando Machlon Shman. We have a brisa who says that the proper name was Machlon Chilin, like you find in Rus. The Tanya Ma'av Siv Pasuk says also in Daf Yomi, it says V'Yukim or V'Yokim V'Anshe Kuziba, the people of Kuziba, V'Yoash V'Saraf Asher Balu LeMoav, they got married to girls from Moab. V'Yishbi Lechem, we'll see what these things mean. V'Advarim Atikim, and these things are ancient. Now, what does that pasuk mean? It's hard to understand. It says V'Yokim, what's Yokim? Zeh Yoshua. Shehekim Shmuel Anshe Gibbon, who kept this promise to the people of Gibbon. Anshe Kuziba is like a lie, right? Like a chazav. Elo Anshe Gibbon, these are people given. Shakaz will be Yeshua, that they lied to Yeshua, they tried to deceive him. V'Yosh V'Saraf, Yosef, Elo Machlon Chilyon. These were Machlon Chilyon. So the Bryce says their real names were Machlon Chilyon. Lamar Kishon Yashua. So why are they called Yosef? Yosh and Yashim. Like we said, they gave up. They abandoned any hope of being redeemed. Sarv Shnas Chayv Sreifa Lamakam, that they deserved Sreifa because of abandoning Eretz Yisrael, or as we said before, another opinion is because they didn't pray for their communities. Asher Balu Moab, that married girls from Moab. Shnasu Nashim Moabi, they married Moabite women. The Yishbi Lechem, who is Yishbi Lechem? Zurus, and that's Moabi Sheshava. They returned to Eretz Yisrael and Idbuka Beis Lechem Yehuda, and who attached herself to Beis Lechem Yehuda from Beis Lechem, because she eventually was the mother of the Davidic dynasty, and it came from Yehuda. But Dvarim Atikim, and these things are ancient. What does that mean? Dvarim Halalu, these things Atik Yoman Amran. Hashem is called the Atik Yoman, the one of ancient days, meaning the one who's lived forever. Right? That's Hashem. He already planned all this. How do you see that? And in the parentheses it says Dechsiv Matzasi David Avdi. It says in Pasuk Tehillim, I found David, my servant. Hashem is saying that Matzasi I found. Remember, the angels told Lot, your two daughters Animso. So he's relating Matzasi David and Animso. And as Hashem already planned at the time of Lot, who was Moab? Moab was Lot's son, right? He came from his daughter when the daughter committed incest with Lot, where they got him drunk, right? And then from that came Moab, right? And Hashem already planned these daughters of Lot. One of them who was the mother of Moab. Hashem planned already then that David is going to come out of Moab, right? Because from the daughter of Moab, Ruth, who was a Moabite who came from Moab, was going to be Meshadach with Boaz, and eventually David will come from that union. Hema Yotzim, the pasuk then goes on, and Daf Yomi says, Hema Yotzim, these were the potters. Yotzim, like Chomer B'yada Yotzim, we say on Leil Yom Kippur. Yoshvei, the ones who sit in the plantations, and the hedges. Imam Melech Mamlachta, with the king in his work. Imam Melech Mamlachta Yish B'Sham, they sit there with the king in his work. All these are words. We'll see what they mean. Yishbu Sham Hema HaYotzrim. Now, so the Yishbu Sham, period. Hema Yotzrim. What are these? These are the potters. Elu ben Yonah ben Rachav. These are the sons of Yonah ben Rachav. Shenatzru Shvuas Avim, that they kept the shvu of their father. Rashbam tells us the shvu of the father not to drink wine and not to build houses. Apparently, not to build houses in Chutz La'aretz. So they kept the vow of their father. Yoshim Tom, who was the ones who sit in the plantations? That's Shlomo. Shedom Latia. Latia grows, and Shlomo Amelech, his kingdom grew. He grew. His monarchy grew. The Malchuso in Shedom Latia b'Malchuso in his monarchy while he was king. The Gedera Zu Sanhedrin. What's the Gedera? The hedges. That's the Sanhedrin. Shegadru Pertusen Yisrael. They fenced in the breaches of Israel. That is, they kept the Jews. They made takanas to keep the Jews honest and to keep them observing Torah. Imam Melech Mamlachto Yishbu Sham. What does it mean? With the king and his wife, they sat there. Yishbu Sham. Zerusa movie. This refers to Ruth herself. Sharasa b'Malchus Shlomo. She saw in the kingdom of Shlomo. Right. We talked about the Natiya Yoshim Natiyim was Shlomo, and with his Sanhedrin, and with Rus, right? Rusamovia. Why Sharasa b'Malchus Shlomo ben Beno Shel ben Beno. Who was Shlomo? Shlomo was her grandson's grandson, right? Shlomo. How did what happened? Rus, right? Rus gave birth to Oved, who was the father of Yishai. So Yishai, right? So Yishai was her grandson, and Yishai's grandson was Shlomo. So it says apparently, and therefore he apparently made room for her. She was able to see this generation. Shemar Vayosam Kisei Lamamelech made her throne there, made it as a king for the mother of the king, meaning Bamar Blazer Leima Shamalchus, not the king, not the mother of. She wasn't the mother of Shlomo. She was the mother of the whole dynasty. So apparently, Rus got the schus not only of extending the dynasty and making the dynasty of David, a melech of Yehuda, but she was also Zoch apparently to see her great grandson. Tanarbanam. We had this. We just had it in Barum and the good part, the bracha. Here it's brought down from Vayikra and you'll eat from the old grain. Below, what does it mean, Yashin? You'll eat it below samanta. It won't have any defect in it. What do we mean by my below samanta? So two explanations. Rav Nachman says, well, it won't have any worms. In other words, your old grain will last. It won't get wormy. Shesh somewhere below strafe, it won't be blasted or blighted. It won't get diseased. Right? Tanik was Rav Sheshes, Tanik was Rav Nachman. There's a right to bro. Tanik was Rav Nachman who says that the promise won't have one. You might think that they're going to wait for the new grain because the old grain was destroyed by the worm. Shekala, Talmud Lomer, both wasa. No, you're going to wait for it until the new one comes because it's going to last until the new ones. That's going to come. New one's going to come by itself. You're not going to have to try to eat the new crop early because the other one was destroyed. No, the other one will not be destroyed by worms. You're going to have both at the same time. It's going to last all the way till the new one comes naturally. You're not going to have to start early. You're going to eat from the old grain. You might think they're going to hope for the new grain to start coming because the old one was bad, was blighted, was diseased. It's going to come by itself, meaning but one says that you're worried about the destruction would come from animals, from worms, and one says it would just come from a disease. Probably it also comes from some sort of bacteria, right? The blight, whatever. But either way, the pshat is no, it's not going to be destroyed. It's not going to be diseased. you're just going to eat the old stuff until the new one comes naturally, because they're both going to be good. The old one will still be good. Another pasuk says in that parsha, and you'll eat yashan, old stuff, no shan, double lashon with no shan. What does that mean? Even if it's more aged, it's older, it's better. Old stuff sometimes is aged like various mashkim, right? Various drinks. The more you age them, the better they are. And the same thing over here with the grain. Normally, you think grain, it gets old. It's not going to be. He says, no, you're going to eat it even if this age is bad. Maybe that's only things which normally are aged. Like we say, Ram says, dark nation, wheat, sometimes that's aged is good, and wine that's aged is good. What about things? The bracha is going to be even things that normally are not aged, like fruits. Fruits normally, when they get old, they're not good anymore. How do you know those are also going to be aged, going to be good? Anything old, anything that will last long and will be aged will be better than the new stuff. And we call it Yashnei Chodesh Totzia. What does that mean? And you'll take out the old stuff because the new stuff is here. That the storehouses, the silos will be full of old grain. The granos malayin chadash, and also the granaries will be full of the granaries where they put the new stuff will also be there. Why should we take out the old stuff for the new stuff? In other words, both are going to be good at the same time. So why should we take out the old stuff? Should we take out they said, why should we take out the old stuff? The old stuff is still very good, but they'll take it out anyway. Why? Because the new stuff is also going to last long. Anything that's aged is good. The bar, except for three things: tamri, dates, shikra, beer, arsana, and fish. Fish, after they get a little older, start to stink. Aged fish is not as good, unless I guess you make herring out of it. You know how to do it. And with small fish normally are not good. So many things when they're aged are better, but not dates, not beer, and not fish. Probably the beer they're talking about is date beer. I don't think they're talking about hops beer. Probably a date beer. Tomorrow we'll start the new parak. Have a good day, everybody. Call to B'sor Tovot.